This is the Body Fuel Performance and Lifestyle Nutrition Podcast. We're here to help you navigate all things nutrition, especially for sports performance, weight loss, and healthy eating. I'm your host, Andrew Dole, registered dietitian, certified executive chef, and USA triathlon coach. Here we go. The topic today, female athlete triad. What it is, who's at risk, what are those risk factors exactly, and what resources are there to prevent and recover from if it occurs. Thank you for joining me today. This is Andrew with Body Fuel. I always appreciate you being here. I'm grateful for you watching and or listening. Let's get into the meat of the topic here. Where did it even come from? I had the pleasure this last week, August 17th, about 2019, to help time athletes at the first ever Colorado USAT Triathlon NCAA Combine. That's right, we now have combines for triathlon to recruit athletes into the collegiate scene. The teams here in the colleges in Division I are going hard, man. They're trying to find the best athletes out there to come compete, and it's an Olympic sport, so this is a feeder system for great athletes to go represent the United States. I was incredibly impressed by the 13 to 18-year-old female athletes at this particular combine running 1 mile time trial and a 100-meter time swim. Holy cow, in Colorado Springs, it had to have been 90 to 105 degrees on this high school track, and these girls were running sub 5:41 miles, 6-minute 1 miles. I was truly impressed with the heats that they ran, and the swims. Oh my goodness, could even get in the pool with these ladies. 50-something second 100s, 104s. They look at you, I'm going to swim a 105. Okay, and they would just go out and they didn't even look like they were tired. Amazing athletes. I'd hate to have to compete against any one of them. So where did this topic of triad come up? I got to speak to all 22 athletes and their parents at the end of the combine as they were cooling down, and I got to choose any topic I wanted for sports performance nutrition. I could not pass up the opportunity to talk about the importance of understanding what triad is, identifying it, and planting the seeds in both the parents and the female athletes' minds that this is a conversation we should be having. We can't avoid it. It might be embarrassing, but in order to protect our athletes and protect themselves, it should be something they're familiar with, understand that it's okay to talk about, and what the topic really even is. So let's talk about what triad is. Let's define this. It is 3 interrelated conditions, and it all starts with eating too few calories over a long period of time. That's called low energy availability or chronic energy deficit. There is a international term called RED-S, Relative Energy Deficit Syndrome. That is where they're combining what happens to either male and females after eating too few calories over a long period of time. I'm not going to talk about RED-S. We're going to focus on female triad because it does involve something very specific to the women, and that is their menstrual cycle and the effect that not having a menstrual cycle has upon them physiologically and psychologically. I'll do another podcast or a vlog about RED-S that encompasses what can happen to male athletes in the future. But right now, that negative energy balance, quite simply, is not eating enough calories over a long period of time to sustain all of the activities that this young female athlete needs. And we have to look at it from the perspective of, not only are they getting older and maturing, the body is developing, that requires additional calories. We're asking them to get up, go to school, maybe have a practice in the morning and the afternoon. So just life in general, and then, hey, let's practice. And if they're not eating enough calories, the body has to stop certain functions to get through or preserve the energy it needs to get through this punishing day that we're asking these female athletes to go under. So what happens if we have chronic energy deficit, we eat too low calories? What happens in the female body is that then the menstrual cycle function is disrupted and estrogen levels drop. And so by not having a regular cycle, a regular mens, a regular period, whatever you'd like to call it, 3 months in a row of not having it is called amenorrhea. That is a real good sign that we have some chronic undernutrition going on. You can't out fuel overtraining, but we can under fuel consistently, making normal training levels seem like they are overtraining, where they're just taxing the body incredibly. And when menstrual dysfunction occurs, no longer does the estrogen do what it needs to in the body, which leads to a whole host of different problems. Physiologically and psychologically. The one that's most notable or that's screened for via test is low bone mass density. And I think it's the most common. If you're to ask a coach, a parent, or a female athlete, hey, what's the risk of not eating enough in this female triad? And they'll most likely say, oh, stress fractures. And that is absolutely true. Short-term, stress fractures are a real concern. Long-term, low bone mass density leads to things like osteopenia or osteoporosis. But there are a whole host of other consequences from not eating enough and not having a menstrual cycle consistently, and we'll talk about some of those in just a second. But let's first talk about who's at risk, all right? So at risk for this female athlete triad, all female athletes are at risk. And like when I had mentioned Red S, all athletes, male and female, are at risk for hormone suppression and negative outcomes of simply not eating enough to fuel their sports. But specifically for triad and women, in 2014, there was a study of only about 343 Division I female athletes. 29% of these female athletes in Division I colleges screened for moderate to high risk for female athlete triad. But it still occurred, which means it's probably a lot more prevalent than one would think. Now, certain sports have higher risk for triad and chronic undereating. These aesthetic or how I look sports, running, swimming, triathlon, dancers and triathletes, gymnasts, they have this appearance component, which means they have to look or feel they have to look a certain way. That pressure of outward perception of, even parents, coaches, and spectators have on that person, the way they should look, is real detrimental to that female athlete who has these pressures, feeling like, oh, I have to lose weight because I have to look like such and such, or this is what all the other collegiate people look like, so I really need to force myself to get here, regardless of how that affects their performance. In their mind, looking like this high-profile athlete or their peers in college or in high school is going to allow them to perform better. And that's just simply not the case, and one of the messages we have to get across to these athletes. Peer pressure and coaching pressures to lose weight or maintain weight so they can perform. I just want to stop and say, and I may take some flack for this, but if you're a parent or you're a coach or you're a trainer and you're telling your athlete that losing weight is a good way to get performance enhancement gains, you're simply wrong. Weight loss should not be the primary method of performance enhancement. It shouldn't really even be a secondary. If weight loss occurs because they eat appropriately and they train hard and they hit their training targets, then so be it. But those other things preceding, are you training well? Are you training hard? Are you meeting your targets? And are you eating to support those physiological needs, those performance needs? Those are primary. Weight loss will typically come when they do all of these things. And really, we actually see, I believe it's Amber Pierce, who's a pro female cyclist, who talks about trying to compete at that level and look around her and say, I'm just a bigger female athlete. I need to lose weight to look like my peers. What that did was actually cause her to perform poorer because she underwent all of this stress of not eating appropriately. And when she gave all of that up and said, you know what, I'm going to eat and do the things I need to, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, I am paraphrasing, she gave up on the looking like everybody else and just ate for what she needed to do to perform, and she started kicking ass. And so it wasn't how she looked, it was how she ate to meet the performance needs. And I think, again, that's an incredible message to pass through. So don't ask your female athletes to lose weight. That's not a performance enhancement. Prevention is an all hands on deck because parents, coaches, peers, and other athletes really have to identify this triad or risk for triad through observation. we have to pay attention to what's going on with the athlete. Are they losing rapid amounts of weight quickly? Are they skipping meals? Are they mentioning that they're restricting foods or certain food groups? Are they getting injured consistently? Are they training poorly? Are they not meeting their training target successfully and it's happening rather rapid? That is something that needs to be observed by everyone. The athlete most likely is going to be the one who dismisses it all and just keeps pushing through for hopes of being better. Everyone around that female athlete really has to be the one to identify. And that starts with the conversation. And really, are you having this conversation as a parent with your athletes, as a coach, as a trainer, or as a peer who steps back and goes, hey, friend, you're not eating a whole lot. What are we trying to do? Lose weight to get faster? Well, there's this triad thing. So even just discussing it amongst one another to have an inner support and peer group can be incredibly beneficial to just breaking open what female athlete triad is and helping it not occur. If we take a look at female health risks from triad, we know that it's the bone fracture, low bone mineral density, stress fractures, bone breaks. But we also get impaired thyroid function, we get depression and anxiety, infertility over the long period of time, and increased risk for cardiovascular disease. These are all part of a long-term negative health outcome consequences of chronically undereating and ignoring the fact that this female athlete's not having a regular menstrual cycle because they're not eating enough and still trying to perform. Some of these won't go away. They can be long-term. I think that's important to notice or mention to this young female athlete. He goes, a stress fracture, I can deal with that. Look, it's more than just a stress fracture. It's more than just some chronic energy that might take you off the field for a couple months. It's real long-term things that can affect your life. Female triad risks in depth. Bone mass loss. We know about this. It's important, though, because our female athletes build 92% of their bone mass before they're 19 years old. And if they're chronically undereating and they're highly competitive in sports and their estrogen levels are low because they're not having a menstrual cycle, their bone mass is not developing appropriately, and it sets them up for osteoporosis and osteopenia as they get older. Chronically restricted calories leads to lower estrogen levels, and estrogen is what helps maintain bone mineralization and development. Chronic undereating increases this risk to a high risk of irreversible bone damage. I think the irreversible component is incredibly important because it's not a short-term thing. There is no performance and weight loss gain that's worth that. Short-term, stress fractures, stress injuries, and chronic injuries will occur. Long-term, we look at osteoporosis, osteopenia, and I can't really even speak to what the impact of long-term depression is. It becomes a behavioral, a habitual thinking process, which can lead to other issues down the road. A chronic undereating can lead to eating disorders. Eating disorders not otherwise specified, ED/NOS, or disordered eating. And that leads to things like fertility issues as they get older, cardiovascular health. Low estrogen increases LDL, and it also decreases the pliability of the vascular system. To my knowledge, that estrogen, women actually have a protective benefit in their estrogen and allowing their cardiovascular system to be pliable, which means it expands and kind of is very elastic and not very rigid, which is what we would see in cardiovascular disease. Psychological aspects of this, again, it's the depression, and that is a snowball that once it starts to it just gets really big. It's that negative behavior. It is cyclical negative thought process. It becomes negative thought process. It becomes just feeling down with mood, and all of those things trigger lots of long-term habits that are difficult to break. And this just simply comes from undereating, or trying to maintain a body weight or an appearance that is inappropriate or unnecessary, and undereating is the method or means through which they try to lose weight. Poor performance. So is this a risk? Yes. Is it a risk of triad? Okay. Yes, And why did I put this on here as a risk? Because ultimately, the whole point of going out and beating yourself up, blood, sweat, and tears for these hard workouts is to be better, to get better, to go out and compete, have fun, and potentially win. And if we don't eat enough, our performance decreases. Our poor health outcomes, that risk increases. You put both of those together, poor performance and poor health outcomes as I get older, that's a lose-lose. There is no win-win there. So what's the point? And if I can say anything, it's eat, ladies. Like, get this food in. Eat appropriate amounts of food to fuel your performance, to run, to swim, to bike as hard and as fast as you possibly can to gain the most amount of benefit out of these training sessions. Let's talk about this, for example, out of a training session. Let's say we have 5 1-mile repeats at whatever, we'll just call it 6 minutes, 5:40, whatever's competitive, right? If they're under eating and they can only get through 3 of those 1-mile intervals and the last 2 they can't hit, they can't hit their times, they've essentially taken that training session and it's been a waste because that was targeted. It was very specific. It was a breakthrough workout meant to increase performance and get them to a next level. And if you can't hit those targets, you're not getting next level. In fact, you're wasting your time. And I think that's true with any athlete, but specifically chronic undereating to try to lose weight to get faster. Losing weight's not going to allow you to hit these targets. Being fueled, going in with enough carbohydrate, enough fat, and enough protein to repair, that's what's going to allow you to do this day after day after day. And that consistency in performance over time is what makes you better. And honestly, let's just say that again. The consistency of being able to train day after day after day after week after month after year, that's what's going to make you an amazing competitor. And in order to do that all the time, every day, you have to eat to fuel that work. It's not losing weight. So coaches and parents and athletes, weight loss is not a performance enhanced gaining technique. Just don't go there. It's not worth it. Prevention and recovery. What are some things that we can do to eliminate the risk? Talk about it. Are you having the conversation? I know as a parent, it might be uncomfortable to look at your daughter and say, hey, are you having a menstrual cycle? Especially for dads. But it is incredibly important. And it's not something that you can even check or test. Like they could lie to you and be like, yeah, dad, I'm having a period every month. And they may not have had one for 3 to 6 months. It's no real test, but if we're talking about it and we're starting the conversation, and at a young age, these young female athletes know that this is a bad thing, and maybe they'll step out and they'll reach out for help when it's necessary. Oral contraceptives. This is interesting because this is twofold. Oral contraceptives nowadays, I don't want to say most, let's not be absolute unless we're sure. Some contraceptives, the pill, or other different types of contraception will actually lessen or eliminate the menstrual cycle. So even the menstrual cycle is not a good key to are you having one. So in some of these cases, a need for labs or other observational factors are incredibly important. Those observational factors that I had mentioned before were like, look, are we having rapid weight loss? Do we look unhealthily lean? Are we not able to complete our workouts? Are we getting fatigued, depressed? Are we sleeping a whole lot more? And look, I know they're teenagers and that occurs, but we have to put it all together. It's not just any one factor. It's all of these things that come together that allow us to identify this situation. Over-the-counter contraceptives that have estrogen. The research and the literature shows that it doesn't have the protective effect, which you would think it would, that if the pill provides estrogen and undereating reduces estrogen, that we could balance this out. But right now, the literature says that if you take the pill and you chronically undereat and you're amenorrheic, you have signs of triad, it's not going to protect your bone mass. Now, there are other research that says if we have an appropriate diet, eating enough, in addition to oral contraceptives, that we can actually have some protective effect on bone mass. Not saying that taking the pill is going to protect this. This is early research. It's not set in stone, but it is out there. But point out that it was with appropriate diet. And that comes back to the main cause of triad was under eating, too few calories. So diet and eating enough is incredibly important. That is the first line defense to preventing athlete triad. So what happens if we do start to see our female athletes become amenorrheic, to start to feel like they're running through mud, swimming through concrete, they just have no juice, no go? Like, these are some pinpointed questions you can ask your athlete as parents and as coaches. Hey, what's going on? You didn't hit your targets today. You know, how did that run feel? Like, oh God, just felt like I was running through mud. Or you can even say, oh, is it like you're running through quicksand? I'm like, yeah, like I just didn't have any juice. Like I felt like I wanted to go, but when I tried to turn it on, like there was nothing there. Oh, you're a little flat, you're under, you're chronically no nutrition, you don't have any carbohydrates on board. So as a real intuitive coach and parent, you can talk to your athlete in this terminology that they resonate with. And to understand, like, look, they're not eating enough. You got to pay attention. Again, it's all of these factors that come together. It's not just one. And then normal labs. This is interesting. So we can have labs done, and I have Dr. Granley, who is a sports med doc here that I collaborate with often, and I sent her an email that says, hey, look, you know, what do, as a sports dietitian, do I ask these parents to go get for our female athletes who are extremely competitive? Are there any lab work we can get to look at that would set us baselines, or that we can for sure know, like, hey, look, our estrogen levels are bad, our thyroid's not working, what's going on? And unfortunately, there was no definitive lab work that can pinpoint triad, because unfortunately, hormone levels and status fluctuate consistently, meaning any of the baseline or any of the lab values we get can be inaccurate. It's simply taking over oral contraceptive, the pill, can change hormone levels by itself and making the tests, again, labs inaccurate. I think labs are an important component of diagnostic with an in-the-know doctor, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Again, it really comes down to observations of how our athlete is performing, what is their mood, what's their biofeedback, how is their training looking. We can't just rely on a diagnostic. And eat. Like, that is incredibly important. So, amenorrheic athlete, your daughter or your athlete hasn't had a period for 3 or 4 months. He's openly mentioned it. You know what we have to do? We got to back off the activity. It doesn't mean we have to stop, but we need to back it off. Maybe they only do half practices. Maybe they miss 1 or 2 practices out of the week. And then we increase calories until we reestablish or restore menstrual cycle occurrence. Doesn't mean they have to stop. I think that would be the worst possible thing we could do to an athlete. Talk about spiraling into depression when we say, hey, no, sorry, you can't play. No, you can't run. No, you can't swim, bike, or do what you love to do. That's bad. I think that's a poor way to go about it. We can decrease activity strategically, increase our calories strategically, and get that weight to come up, get that restoration of the menstrual cycle, and then maintain that as they go back, and watch it very closely as they increase their activity levels. Eat. It's incredibly important. Work with a sports dietitian. I can't tell you enough. This is what we do. And weight loss, again, is not a performance enhancement strategy. Just don't even go there. It is not worth it. If we had some resources, what could we use? FemaleAthleteTriad.org. It is a great coalition or consortium of doctors who are looking at putting together resources to help identify female athlete triad through a group of questionnaires and questions, how to deliver these questions. It's just a great resource for coaches and parents to go take a look at. Sports dietitians like myself, when this is what we do, we look at nutrition, because nutrition is the number one frontline defense against triad. How do we increase calories? What are some functional ways and practical ways to do this? How can we work with the coaches to back them out of their training intensity, duration, TSS, fatigue levels, and increase their calories and help watch this? How can we collaborate with a sports-focused primary care physician or an OBGYN who understands how to read the labs? Not all doctors, primary care, are this is their scope or this is their shtick. It's not what they do. Sometimes finding, if you have a very athletic female, finding a doctor that understands that sports med aspect, what the lab values mean, and how to collaborate with other practitioners like a sports dietitian and mental health care provider to create this collaborative care for this one athlete. Because oftentimes when an eating disorder is in place, or we have highly competitive females, this is where they develop eating disorders or poor relationships with food. Having that individual who can manage the psychological aspect of the sport, the psychological aspect of competition, weight, body dysmorphia, body image, in eating, we all come together to help this athlete succeed. Hey, I really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. All of my information is over there, as well as links to other videos that I have. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.